Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a monthly podcast focused on the African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues. Produced as a collaboration between the Australian Embassy in Addis Ababa and Amani Africa Research and Media Services. My name's Adam. I hope everyone listening is happy and healthy. Today I'm pleased to be joined once again by Amani's Director of Programs, Ms. Betania Tedesse. Great to see you again, Betania. How are you going?
Thank you very much, Adam, for having me, and good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. And welcome to our listeners. Let's start off, as usual, with a look back at the month just past. February was obviously a really busy month for the whole diplomatic community and those watching and commenting on the AU. The PSC under South Africa's chairship took a close look at some really topical peace and security issues, notably the situations in Libya, the Tigray conflict in northern Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan and the DRC. February was also Summit Month in Addis Ababa, and the AU's Executive Council and the General Assembly, or the AU Summit, considered various topics related to the peace and security agenda. In amongst all that really busy agenda, Betania, can you pick out some of the details for us and explain what you took from the month?
Yes, absolutely. You're right, Adam. It was a very busy month for everyone. And if you see it from the PSC perspective, again, it was a very interesting month as there were a lot of country and specific crisis and conflict situations that were tabled by South Africa as a chair of the PSC for the month of February. One of the agenda items which received a lot of attention both in the PSC but also around the summit time is the situation in Libya.
Yeah.
So one of the decisions, for example, that the PSC took after it's deliberated on Libya was with regards to the coordination and collaboration that is needed between the African Union and the UN Special Representative for Libya, Batili. And also one of the decisions that the PSC made was around the relocation of the AU mission in Libya, which is currently being hosted in Tunisia, for that to be relocated in Tripoli, so that there is more proximity and to the actual conflict settings.
Yeah.
Another decision also is to undertake a field mission to Libya, so that's also very interesting. And you see a certain kind of revival of the AU to also be part of this whole process in terms of supporting Libya. Again, this is something that the A3 within the UN Security Council commended, and this was made reference by Mozambique as that was speaking on behalf of the A3 during a UN Security Council session on Libya that took place in February.
Okay.
So again, beyond the PSC engagement, I think the summit's period was also very interesting in the kind of attention it gave to the situation in Libya. There was the high-level committee meeting on Libya under Congo's leadership. And this one, again, it really deliberated on a number of situations, including the reconciliation process, the unification of government, but also, importantly, the role of neighboring countries in the security situation in the political situation of Libya. So another commitment, an outcome that also emerged from this session is the announcement made by the AUC chair to have a national reconciliation conference on Libya under Congo's leadership. So the dates are yet to be confirmed for this reconciliation conference, but it's really important to have this kind of deliberations and discussions, because if you see from the UN Security Council aspect, at the moment there is a bit of divergence on the next steps or on how to support the process in Libya.
Okay.
Some members support the holding of elections, others prioritize the need of having an interim government even before thinking about elections. So it's going to be very interesting. The next few months will be also very interesting to see how the AU and UN can also collaborate as to not create like parallel kind of processes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from February that you want to draw our attention to? I know it was a big month for Omani as well, in the margins of the summit. Do you want to tell us about your events and any outcomes from them?
So February, yes, we had a couple of events. Particularly, we had two that we convened. One was a high-level event which we co-organized with Namibia. This was it was on Africa and the reform of the multilateral system.
Yeah.
Which is something that we are going to follow up in, going forward. But this is something that we are doing jointly with Namibia.
Yeah, very topical as well during the summit, right? Discussing the whole architecture of the international sort of multilateral system.
Absolutely, and really contributing from an African perspective really is very important. And the other one was 2 days consultation, CSO consultation, and we brought together a number of participants from across the continent and deliberated on a number of policy issues that are very much, topical at the moment within the African Union, but also to have that a revived CSO space engaging the AU as well.
Yeah, I was really encouraged to see the sort of enlarged participation and voice given to CSOs during the summit and in a lot of events in the margins. As you say, really, really important to see that. Okay, February, that's February. Let's look ahead at March. Before we talk about the PSC under the chairship of Tanzania, let's sort of look back or take a step back, if you like, and look at the UN Security Council with Mozambique in the chair for the month of March. What will the month look like for Mozambique and what can we expect to be on their agenda?
So March is going to be interesting, as you pointed out. We have Tanzania, who will be chairing the PSC, but we also have an African presidency in the UN Security Council. We have Mozambique, who will be the president for the council during the month of March. So when you also look at the program of work, there is some kind of convergence, some agenda items that are reflected in both councils. Particularly when you see the presidency of Mozambique, there are two signature events that Mozambique is planning for the month. The first one is on women, peace, and security. This is something also that you'll see in the program of month for the PSC.
Yep.
So this is the actual month, the month of March, that will be dedicated for this particular agenda item. And the other signature event by Mozambique is also on terrorism and enhancing cooperation between the UN and regional organizations. This is also very much...
that makes good sense.
Absolutely.
In the Mozambique context, yeah.
Exactly. So it's not just, because of the experience of Mozambique that is currently having, in its region, but also in the deployment of Samim, which is something that will also be considered by the PSC during the month of March.
Yeah. Okay, well, really, really fascinating, those convergences between the agendas of the two bodies, and we wish Mozambique well. Let's turn to our normal sort of core focus for the podcast, the month ahead for the Peace and Security Council. As you said, Tanzania takes the chair and will convene 6 substantive sessions, with all but one taking place at ambassadorial level. 3 address country-specific issues, and the rest will consider thematic issues. And the PSC will also undertake a field mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So as I look at Amani's essential reading, the forward-looking analysis for the month, which I encourage our listeners to read, I see that the first session of March will look at the Continental Structural Conflict Prevention Framework, a tool developed to deploy preventative measures before disagreements within or between member states turns to violence. What do you think the status report on this framework will tell the PSC?
So regarding this agenda, I think the program of work of March has a certain kind of continuity when you see it in relation to the month of February in this aspect of, you know, including agenda items that look into prevention, early warning. If you recall, in February, there was a briefing by CISA, which looked into the security outlook for 2023. So this session, which was scheduled for 1st of March, but it was postponed to a later date, it was expected to consider again this continental structural conflict prevention framework, which is a critical tool again for preventive diplomacy, for early warning, and it was also developed to, in fact, address structural issues to avert any kind of deterioration of security threats across the continent. But this, of course, did not take place as planned earlier this month.
It's really interesting that these themes of preventative action and early warning detection seem to really be back front and centre on the PSC agenda. As difficult as it is, I think, for lots of reasons, but I'm really encouraged to see that sort of deep thinking and heavy lifting being done in that space. Flowing on from that, obviously the second session for the month is due to be focused on conflict prevention in a slightly different way. It will involve the first briefing of the PSC by the panel of the wise since 2017. Why has it been, such a long time between briefings? If you can, consider that, and what topics will be under discussion during this briefing session?
So this is also very timely since, as you rightly pointed out, it has been a very long time since the panel of the wise briefed the PSC. And also this, the panel of the wise is another preventive tool in the African peace and security architecture. And this will be actually, a very timely briefing because there was another scheduled briefing that was expected to take place back in 2022 in June.
Okay.
That was postponed. That did not happen. So this one is happening even at the ministerial level. So it's going to be very interesting. The coming session, the one taking place on 3rd March, it's expected to engage the PSC, particularly the new members which were elected back in 2022 will engage the PSC. They will brief the council on their activities. And if you recall, one of the members of the panel of the wise, Dr. Kumzileng, is also a member of the high-level panel that was established to mediate and facilitate the peace process in Ethiopia. So it will also be very interesting to have her perspective, her intervention as well with regards to the peace process in Ethiopia. Another important factor, I think, for the PSC is also to recall its previous decision back in November, which requested the panel of the wise to undertake a field mission to Chad and report back to the PSC during this month in March. So it's good to have that follow-up utilizing this session.
Okay, absolutely fascinating. We'll look forward to any readout of that session with great interest. Moving on the 7th of March, I understand at the moment there is scheduled to be an update briefing on Somalia and the activities of ATMIS. The first phase of ATMIS is now due to draw down on 30th of June 2023 rather than late last year. There's been an extension. How is that looking in your view? Is it on track to deliver?
Well, this is going to be one of the things that this session will deliberate on. And yes, during the last session that took place in November, based on the request that it received from the federal government of Somalia, the PSC decided to extend the first phase of ATMIS operational timelines. So there is an extension of another 6 months. So one of the things that this session will rightly deliberate on is how this new extension, the first 3 months of this extension looks like.
Okay.
But also the security situation, including the operations against Al-Shabaab, but also the implementation of the Somalia transition plan, particularly with regards to force generation. That is very important, and the integration of regional forces into national security forces, which are all key ingredients for the drawdown of ATMIS by the end of the first phase, the 30th June 2023. So another area I think that's also very important that will also receive attention is regarding predictable financing for ATMIS.
Right.
The PSC in its last session in November requested the African Union Commission and the UN to convene this pledging conference to mobilize support to ATMIS. And that was actually expected to take place this month, before the end of this month, because funding has been a real challenge, not just to ATMIS, but to a number of peace support operations across the continent.
Sure.
And during the AU summit, I think one of the references, one of very interesting remarks made by the UN Secretary General is also his expression for support to the creation of this robust kind of peace enforcement missions and counter-terrorist operations led by the AU. So he really expressed his support to the creation of this kind of operations, and for these operations to also have access to predictable funding, including through UN assist contributions. So there is at least that kind of commitment from the Secretary General point of view.
Yeah, no, that's encouraging. That's a really important conversation to have. I want to sort of have a look at the next couple of sessions quite quickly for the sake of time. We've got a session on the 9th of March, which will consider the Continental Maritime Command Post exercise, which is like an exercise in sort of encouraging cooperation between different naval forces in the Gulf of Guinea. So I'm interested to know briefly what you can share with us about this exercise, and then immediately after, any comments you have to make on the next session, which is about the African governance report for last year, which I imagine will be interesting reading. Your thoughts on those two sessions, please.
So on 9th March, there's going to be this briefing on this Continental Maritime Command Post exercise. Again, this is happening within the framework of the African Standby Force. It's really to provide that kind of capacity for the African Standby Force, this naval capacity, given that there is increasing threats, maritime threat as well. So that is going to take place, and also to have a bit of clarity on continental and regional coordination in terms of enhancing this capacity of ASF. The other, the committee of experts meeting taking place between 10 and 13th on the African governance report. Again, that is something that the PSC will consider during the month, particularly with regards to the state of governance in Africa. And of course, there were a lot of sessions that were dedicated last year, particularly when it comes to unconstitutional change of government and political transitions in various countries in Africa. So that is also going to contribute a lot to that debate.
Yeah, those themes are really sort of under the microscope during the whole sort of summit season as well, weren't they? And yeah, interesting to have a look at the African governance report in due course, I imagine. As you mentioned earlier, March is a focused month for bringing attention to women, peace and security agenda, scheduled, with events scheduled to complement International Women's Day on the 8th of March. The PSC has a session scheduled for the 14th of March, which is a kind of an annual event or session, I understand. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of this item and what we can expect to be discussed?
So the PSC has been considering the Women, Peace and Security agenda every year in March. The session actually was first held in March 2010, in which the PSC agreed to have a dedicated annual open session on the peace and security theme. During the earlier years, however, the PSC used to consider the women, peace, and security agenda jointly with children affected by armed conflicts.
Right.
But increasingly, this has changed over the years, and the women, peace, and security theme, the agenda, started becoming a standalone agenda item, particularly with the appointment of the Special Envoy on Women, Peace, and Security. The frequency of sessions has also increased. In addition to the March session, you also have the October PSC session, which is dedicated to commemorate the anniversary of 1325.
Yeah.
So there are more sessions taking place on this particular theme. And the PSC used, of course, this platform, this open session on women, peace, and security to deliberate on various aspects of the agenda. For example, last year there was an interesting theme which dealt with WPS in urban settings,
yeah,
and what that looked like in cities. So, and this year, I mean, we're still going to see what kind of specific theme that the PSC will focus on. But over the years, it had really looked into a variety of thematic areas within the framework of women, peace, and security.
Okay. We're getting through the month. We're into the 20s. From the 20th to the 23rd of March, the PSC will conduct a field mission to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We've seen a few field visits recently, and I guess this one highlights the importance of the PSC doing them at critical times in critical places. Why a field visit to the DRC now?
Yes, so the PSC has increasingly been engaged in field visits, which it was something, this particular activity of the PSC in terms of undertaking field visits has been a bit limited because of COVID-19, but now you see
Right.
the PSC much more engaged in undertaking field visits. Just last month, the PSC visited South Sudan. They met both with the president and the first vice president. So this month, the PSC will be undertaking a field mission to DRC. It's to be recalled that the PSC was actually was scheduled to have a field visit back in 2022 in June, not just to DRC, but the entire Great Lakes region, some countries in the Great Lakes region. Of course, due to security reasons, that did not materialize, but the PSC only went to Burundi at that time. Of course, the situation remains tense. It's very volatile, but still the PSC will be undertaking this very important field mission, and it's as you mentioned, it's also an expression of the importance the PSC attaches to in terms of addressing the security challenge, the political challenge that the DRC is facing at the moment. But this is again, speaking from the UN Security Council angle as well. The UN Security Council is also scheduled to undertake a field mission to DRC during the month of March. And DRC has also received a lot of attention during the summit time.
Sure.
There were two high-level engagements. The mini summit convened by EAC and ICJLR, and the heads of states and governments PSC session that was undertaken under South Africa's chairship. And a number of decisions actually came out from that summit level PSC sessions. So the PSC really called for the revitalization of some instruments, namely the Peace and Security Cooperation Framework Agreement for DRC and the region, which is which is really timely to really revive that mechanism. And it also tasked the African Union and the relevant regional economic communities in the region to work towards the revitalization, the operationalization of this framework, and to report back to the PSC again. And the timeline it gave, it's about like 6 weeks for that report back. It also, of course, demanded armed groups and operating in the region, including M23 and ADF, FDLR, to cease hostilities. Another request that was made towards the African Union Commission is also to identify modalities for the utilization of the Peace Fund to support the EAC regional force deployed in Eastern DRC. And again, to report back to the council again. So there are a lot of decisions that require a lot of follow-up within a very limited time.
Sure.
So, but the developments in DRC are not that encouraging at the moment.
No,
and as you see, the M23 continues to expand in terms of occupying new territories, including some strategic towns close to Goma.
We'll watch for the outcomes of that field visit with great interest, and obviously I think the last couple of agenda items for the month includes consideration or initial consideration of reporting coming out of that field visit. So maybe we'll leave consideration of what that might be, and we'll hear what they have to say. But the other agenda item for the end of March we should have a look at, which will be consideration of the situation in northern Mozambique and the operations of the SADC mission in the context of the ongoing terrorist activity in Cabo Delgado, and as you sort of previewed, associated logistical and financial challenges facing the SAMIM force. Tell us a little bit more about that agenda item and what you see as the main issues.
So this will be an important, again, session for the PSC. The last time the PSC considered the situation in Mozambique and SAMIM was back in November under Namibia's chairship. So now it will also be important to reflect a bit on some of the challenges that were also identified back then during the session relating to logistics and finance, but also to receive a bit of an update because there was a bit of transition that was also indicated earlier from scenario 6 to scenario 5 for SAMIM, and eventually, of course, the transition to scenario 4, which this entails shifting from purely military operations to a more multidimensional kind of intervention consisting of civilian, military, and police components, and also to fast track a bit of the peace building aspects of the support. So the AU has also made efforts in supporting SAMIM, particularly through the provision of equipment from the Continental Logistical Base. But there are, of course, a lot of pressing challenges, including coordination on the ground, between the different forces that are operating.
Yeah.
But also, importantly, is the coordination between the African Union and the SADC mission. I think that's also an important area that needs to be further strengthened and enhanced in order to provide a more effective support in fighting the threats, and also providing support to Cabo Delgado province and the people.
Yeah, big issue to finish the month of May. Thanks very much for insights, Britannia, on those things we've talked about. We're nearly out of time, so I just want to wish all the very best to Tanzania as it chairs the PSC in March, and of course all the best to all the member states and everybody taking part in the work of the Peace and Security Council. As always, we hope this podcast continues to provide an accessible way to understand the PSC and its work. Tanya, thanks as always for joining me and for sharing your insights and knowledge and experience with us. Before we go, as usual, we'd like to wish the following African states happy National Days of Celebration in March. We have Morocco on the 2nd, Ghana on the 6th, Mauritius on the 12th, Tunisia on the 20th, and Namibia on the 21st of March. We wish you all peace and prosperity.
Thanks for joining us this month Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast, which is a collaboration between Amani Africa and the Australian Embassy in Addis. And we hope to see you next month. Thank you.